Have you ever stopped to think that space, all that stuff way out there, isn't just about rockets and astronauts, that it actually really impacts your life right here on Earth? We all remember the moon landing, right? 1969, huge moment, America leading the way.
Absolutely iconic.
But what about now? What about the future?
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty significant on that front. It's a brand new executive order, number 14335.
Right.
The title is Enabling Competition in the Commercial Space Industry. It's actually scheduled for publication August 19th, 2025, so it's really fresh.
And it's more than just, typical government paperwork. This is a big deal.
Definitely not just bureaucracy.
No. I mean, this is really about making sure America stays out front. It's about fostering innovation, making it easier, frankly, for private companies to launch rockets, run missions, operate in space.
So kind of clearing the runway.
Exactly. Clearing the runway for that next generation of space pioneers. It's about reducing that friction. Okay, so that's what we'll be unpacking. Why this order is, why it's supposed to be so important for the economy, for national security, too. We'll look at how it aims to cut through some of that famous red tape.
A lot red tape.
Yeah, and what it means for future space stuff, even those spaceports people are starting to talk about more.
Right, the infrastructure piece.
So let's dive in. Okay, so the order itself, right at the start, it connects back to that 69 moon landing legacy.
It does. It sets a pretty ambitious tone.
It basically says, look, we need to make sure that new space industries, exploration, even defense stuff, that it's pioneered here in America.
Yeah, not by other nations. It's very explicit about ensuring U.S. leadership. And the core reasons are laid out pretty clearly. It's about making sure U.S. companies can, launch efficiently, conduct their missions, and even get back into U.S. airspace without unnecessary hurdles.
Efficiency seems key.
It is. Because that efficiency is directly tied to, economic growth, national security, and hitting those big federal space exploration goals. You can't lead if you're bogged down.
Right, if you're stuck in paperwork while others are launching.
Exactly. It's about maintaining that competitive edge in what's become a really fast-moving global arena.
So the stated policy goal, it uses this phrase, enhance American greatness in space. That's pretty bold language.
It is bold. And the plan involves fostering a competitive launch market, really ramping up the number of commercial launches.
The cadence, they call it.
Right, the cadence. And encouraging these novel space activities. We can get into what that means later, all by 2030.
And the promise is smoother, faster license and permit approvals for U.S. companies. Sounds good, but easier said than done, maybe.
Well, it's definitely ambitious. But think about why American greatness in space, as they put it, actually matters to you listening right now.
Yeah, bring it down to earth for us.
Okay, well, think about your phone's GPS. Or the weather forecast you checked this morning. Or maybe getting decent internet access if you live somewhere rural.
Satellites.
All satellites. This order is about speeding up the development and launch, the tech behind all that. It's about creating high-tech jobs here, building new industries.
Okay.
So when you hear about streamlining approvals, it means potentially faster deployment of better communication networks, more accurate navigation, things that, genuinely affect your day-to-day life and the economy.
Okay, so let's talk about that streamlining, cutting regulatory barriers. Where do they start with something as basic, but obviously critical, as launching a rocket and bringing it back safely?
Yeah, launch and re-entry, that's fundamental. They're starting with the Department of Transportation, the DOT. They handle a lot of the commercial space launch oversight.
Right.
So the Secretary of Transportation, working with the Council on Environmental Quality, or CEQ, they're basically being told, use your existing powers to cut down or speed up environmental reviews and other roadblocks for these launch and re-entry licenses.
Use powers they already have, but maybe weren't using fully?
Potentially, yes. Or using them more aggressively. Things like specific parts of the law, like 51 U.S.C. 5905 B2C are mentioned. And critically, identifying DOT functions that aren't even subject to NEPA.
Okay, NEPA keeps coming up. And these categorical exclusions, can you break that down? What is NEPA, really?
Sure. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, big environmental law. It basically says federal agencies have to stop and assess the environmental impact of major things they do before they do them.
Makes sense. Due diligence for the environment.
Exactly. Now, categorical exclusions, or CEs, think of those as like a pre-approved checklist for certain types of actions.
Okay.
If an activity falls into a category that, based on past experience, is known not to have a significant environmental impact, individually or cumulatively, it can be categorically excluded from that full deep dive environmental review.
Ah, like a fast pass for routine stuff.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's a fast pass. It avoids doing a massive study every single time for things that are, frankly, routine and understood. Big time saver, cuts down on uncertainty for companies.
Okay, that clears it up. What about specific rules? The order mentions Part 450.
Right, Part 450 of Title 14 in the Code of Federal Regulations. That's a big one. It's got a lot of the detailed rules for commercial launches and reentries.
So they're looking at changing that.
Definitely reevaluating it. The order tells the Secretary of Transportation to look really hard at amending it, maybe even getting rid of parts that don't make sense anymore.
Like what, specifically?
Well, several things, like waivers. Should companies get waivers from certain requirements if their rocket has really advanced safety systems? Like, automated flight termination systems.
If the tech itself makes an old rule kind of redundant.
Exactly. Or waivers for what they call hybrid vehicles. These are vehicles that might say, take off like a plane, go to space, and land like a plane. If they already have an FAA airworthiness certificate, meaning the FAA says they're safe to fly in the air, do they need a whole separate duplicative set of space-specific safety checks for every single flight?
Seems logical to streamline that.
It could save a lot of time and money. They're also looking at how companies show a reentry vehicle is reliable enough to prevent a, quote, high-consequence event. Maybe refining those standards, and just generally removing requirements that are just outdated, things that don't really apply to how launches actually work today.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the analogy I use is like, updating road rules written for horses and buggies when now we have electric cars with collision avoidance. The rules need to catch up to the tech, while still keeping safety paramount, of course.
That horse and buggy analogy really clicks. Okay, so that's launching and reentering. But rockets need a place to launch from. Spaceports, are they hitting similar roadblocks?
They absolutely are. Building or expanding spaceports, that next-generation spaceport infrastructure, faces its own set of hurdles.
Like what kind of hurdles?
Well, the order points to issues with states complying properly with the Coastal Zone Management Act. That can really complicate things if you're trying to build near a coast, which many launch sites are.
Ah, okay. Coastal regulations.
Right. And also just limitations on using federal lands, finding suitable locations that meet all the safety and environmental requirements, and then getting approval to use federal land if needed. That can be a long process.
So more complexity. What's the plan to speed that up? More fast passes?
Sort of, but it also involves getting different government agencies to work together better. This is where you see commerce, defense, transportation, NASA, all the big players being told to coordinate.
How?
Within 180 days, they need to look at that state compliance with the Coastal Zone Management Act. And if they find state or local rules about using federal lands that seem inconsistent with federal law, they might even flag that to the Department of Justice.
Wow, okay. So putting some pressure on.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But also, they have to create a memorandum of understanding and an MOU, again, within 180 days. The goal is to align how all these agencies review spaceport proposals, cut out the duplication, so a company isn't bouncing between agencies getting slightly different answers or doing the same paperwork multiple times.
One-stop shopping, ideally.
That's the idea, more streamlined. And yes, environmental reviews are part of this too. Just like with launch, the agencies involved, Defense, Interior, DOT, NASA, CEQ, are tasked with speeding up environmental and administrative reviews for spaceport permits.
And I bet categorical exclusions come up again.
You bet. They're specifically told to look at establishing new NEPA categorical exclusions just for spaceport development activities, again for those routine parts. And there's another interesting environmental piece. They're also able to consider applying to the Endangered Species Committee for exemptions for certain spaceport projects, especially weighing national security needs.
Balancing progress with protection.
That seems to be the intent. Acknowledging the need for speed, but also the existing environmental laws.
Okay, this next bit sounds really futuristic. Novel space activities. What on Earth or off Earth does that mean?
Yeah, it does sound a bit sci-fi, doesn't it? But it's a real regulatory challenge. Basically, novel space activities are things happening in space that are technically covered by our international obligations under the Outer Space Treaty of 1967.
Okay, the treaty that says nations are responsible for what their companies do in space.
Right. But these activities aren't clearly addressed by any existing U.S. regulations. Think about stuff that maybe wasn't even conceived of decades ago when current rules were written.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, maybe in-space manufacturing, building things in orbit, or advanced satellite servicing, like refueling and repairing satellites, or maybe even Down the line, asteroid resource prospecting on a commercial scale.
Stuff where the rule book just has a blank page.
Exactly. And if there's no clear way to get authorization, innovation gets stuck. Companies can't get insurance, they can't get investment, they can't legally operate. This order tries to fix that gap.
So how do they plan to handle these brand new things if there are no rules? Seems tricky.
It is tricky. They're not creating specific rules for every possible future activity right now. Instead, the order tells the Secretary of Commerce within 150 days to propose a process.
A process for what?
A process for granting individualized mission authorizations.
Yeah.
So case-by-case approvals for these novel activities. The key goal is speed and streamlining, explicitly to boost U.S. competitiveness.
And what does that process need to include?
It has to incorporate feedback from other relevant agencies. Critically, it must have a definite timeline for getting a yes or no answer.
Certainty. Businesses need that.
Hugely important. And it needs clear requirements for what applicants need to provide. So it's not just a black box. One important note, this specific process is not for human spaceflight. That's handled separately with much more rigorous safety oversight already.
Okay, so it's like setting up a special permit office for totally new kinds of ventures that don't fit the old forms.
That's a good way to think about it. It allows innovation to move forward, but with oversight tailored to the specific activity.
This sounds like a really ambitious overhaul. Lots of moving parts, lots of agencies involved. How do they make sure this actually happens, that it doesn't just, fizzle out in bureaucracy? Who's really in charge of pushing this?
That's always the question with these big government initiatives, isn't it? Accountability.
Right.
The order addresses this by creating or elevating specific leadership roles.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly, too, within 60 days.
Okay, like what?
First, the Secretary of Transportation has to set up a new position, right there in the office of the Secretary, specifically focused on championing innovation and cutting regulations in commercial space transport.
So, someone whose whole job is this.
Yes, high-level focus. Then, over the FAA, the administrator has to appoint a senior executive, specifically a non-career, so likely a political appointee, focused on the administration's goals as the associate administrator for commercial space transportation. Again, dedicated leadership.
Okay, that's transportation and FAA. What else?
The Department of Commerce. Within 60 days as well, the Secretary of Commerce is directed to elevate the existing Office of Space Commerce, so it reports directly into the Office of the Secretary.
Lifting it up in the hierarchy.
Exactly. Giving it more clout, more direct access, making commercial space a higher strategic priority within commerce.
So these aren't just shuffling deck chairs. It's about putting people with authority in place to drive these changes.
That seems to be the clear signal. It's about giving these efforts dedicated resources, leadership attention, and frankly, the bureaucratic muscle to push through changes across different parts of the government, making sure someone is accountable for delivering on these goals.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've gone through launch, spaceports, novel activities, the leadership structure. What's the big takeaway for you, listening at home or in your car?
I think the big takeaway is that this Executive Order 14335 signals a very serious, very deliberate push to make sure America doesn't just maintain its lead in space, but actually accelerates it, especially in the commercial sector.
It's about staying ahead.
It really is. When you look at all the pieces, streamlining the environmental reviews, creating these clear paths for new kinds of space businesses, coordinating agencies, it's all designed to do a few key things.
Yes.
Speed up innovation, boost national security, and drive economic growth.
Right.
And that connection to you is real. It affects future jobs, maybe for your kids in STEM fields. It affects the technologies you rely on every day, like we talked about GPS, internet, weather. And it affects how quickly we see these really exciting new space ventures actually, well, take off.
Yeah, moving from sci-fi concepts to actual services or industries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This order is trying to pave the way for that to happen faster and more efficiently, driven by American companies.
So here's something to think about as you go about your week. These kinds of policy documents, they can seem really dry, really abstract, but they are actively shaping the future, not just out in the cosmos, but right here. How different might things look in, say, 2030 because of changes like these? With a more competitive, faster-moving commercial space sector, what new frontiers technologically, scientifically, economically might America open up by then? It's definitely something to watch.